Hello and welcome to my very first video for teachers. I've got about 1,000 followers on Twitter, and it seems that about 75–80% of those are teachers. One thing a lot of teachers always say to me is, how do you find the time to do the YouTube videos, the ebook, the podcasts and all the rest of it? And I think, I've got quite a lot that I can offer teachers, trainee teachers, or even students who are thinking of becoming teachers to help you to free up time to work efficiently and effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of videos on this new channel, which I'd love you to subscribe to, which are for teachers, and I will cover lots of different things that I've learned over the years of teaching. But I'll also cover, how to make the sort of videos I make, what software you need, how to make prezzies, and how to work cooperatively using Google Docs, and all the kind of things that I think, I can offer people to, to help them. So on the screen, you can see this rather beautiful picture of a road, and I'm calling this series The Road to Outstanding. And the subtext is how to be an outstanding teacher. And as you can see, the symbolism of the road is suggesting that it's a journey, and we're all on a journey. But part one of the journey is something that I developed a year or two ago and have been working on in my school, which is endpoint planning. So, interesting quote here. In order to live a successful life, one should define where they want to end up and then plan how to get there. So this idea, which is, certainly hundreds and hundreds of years old, is to look at your end point and then plan the steps on how to get there. And that's something that I do in teaching, which I'll share with you in this video. I think a lot of us as teachers have very similar problems and mistakes and stresses. Endpoint planning can really help with that. So if you're a teacher who finds yourself overloaded with a big stack of marking to do every half term, assessments for every class all built up in a big scary looking pile of work, then endpoint planning will help. If you're a teacher who always seems to overrun on deadlines, who struggles to get things done when they're supposed to be done, then endpoint planning will help. If you have issues getting your kids to behave, endpoint planning will help. If you have students who don't really take ownership of their learning, then endpoint planning will help. And if you are being observed, whether by a mentor or someone in a senior position in the school or Ofsted, then endpoint planning is something that ticks all the right boxes for visitors, and is certainly an impressive thing to be doing. So endpoint planning, let's look at the essentials. Endpoint planning is where you look at a unit of work. It could be a half-term scheme of work, or even on a small scale, a lesson, or just a short series of lessons. And you think about what the end point is and how long you've got on the unit and the skills you need to cover in the time that you've got. Now, I'll show you an example of an endpoint plan. What I've found in my experience is that teachers tend to do all of this stuff in their heads, but they never share it with the students. And I found it very beneficial to share with the students. This is an example of an endpoint plan, a student copy, and I'll go through it stage by stage. But if you'd like some examples, email me, abruff@live.co.uk, and I will send you some. So an endpoint plan I give to every student for every unit that we work on. The first thing you specify is the time period. So I've got a hypothetical unit here called The Big Adventure. The time period was 6 weeks, so it's very clear to students from the outset how long they're going to be spending on this particular unit. The end result, or the end point, you will produce a piece of creative writing entitled The Big Adventure, an exercise which develops skills in imaginative and organised writing. 5 short videos will act as a guide on what to write about. So that's a kind of overview of what they're going to have to produce at the end of the unit. Then the assessment objectives. So in our school, we map out different assessments to different assessment objectives. And this one will be assessed on WAF 3 and 4, and it explains what they are. And then the due date, which is in this case the 1st of March. So nothing particularly fascinating there, just a kind of outline of what you're doing, how long you're spending on it, and what it's being assessed on. The next bit is where it gets really, quite good. So here we have the relevant level or grade success criteria. And what I've done is I've written out or typed out the things that need to be exhibited from the students in my class who are aiming for a level 5. So to get a level 5 in WAF3, you need to organise your writing into sentences and paragraphs and use connectives. To get a level 5 in WAF4, you need to have clearly structured writing and use connectives within and between paragraphs. So if you look at that as a class teacher, it makes you realise, okay, these are the specific skills I need to teach in order for my class to be successful in this assessment. And then finally, based on my knowledge of the class, learning needs to focus on. So knowing the group as I do and knowing what they know about sentences, paragraphs, connectives, structure, these are things I need to teach them for this unit of work. And that is pretty much an endpoint plan. You do have the optional extra at the bottom of a little outline of the lessons, but that's it in a nutshell. So why is that so kind of important? Well, I could tell you a couple of anecdotal suggestions. How many times have you taught a unit and you've looked at the outcome of the unit? So, for example, the outcome of this unit was to write a story based on some videos. And you might think, oh, I've got some good ideas here. I'll start off by showing them some really good short stories that I've read before, and then I'll get them to storyboard their story, and I might get them to act it out a bit. And you have all these ideas, but if you create an endpoint plan and you actually map it out, you see how much time exactly you have to do what you want to do. So if I know I've got 6 weeks at 3 lessons a week, that's 18 lessons, that's 18 hours. And I look at all the things I need to achieve in that 18 hours. And I can think, okay, and I think this right, before I've even started, okay, I'm not actually going to have time to do some of those other things that I was thinking of doing. Because if I'm going to get this assessment done and I'm going to focus on the assessment criteria and I'm going to get them a level 5 by doing these things, then, I don't have time. So it really does help you to sort of work out the priorities in your teaching and learning and the things you're going to focus on. Secondly, this bit here is really useful because it stops you from just teaching content. So again, you might think, I'm going to teach a little bit on how to write an opening, but your job as a teacher, my job as a teacher, is to get the levels for these students. So by focusing on the specific levels from the success criteria, from the APP grids or the GCSE mark scheme, if you're doing a GCSE assessment, you know exactly what you need to teach them in order to get them the levels they need. So it's a very focused way of teaching. Now, I'll show you another example, a Key Stage 4 example. So here's Year 9, Unit 3, Part A, is Extended Reading Endpoint Plan. So this was the endpoint plan for the controlled assessment of Mice and Men from the English language course. The overview tells them the title they're going to be working on, how many marks it's out of, that it's worth 15% of their final grade, how long they're going to have on it, the assessment objectives, the A-star success criteria, that's straight from the specification from the AQA, and based on my knowledge of the class, what learning needs to focus on. So if you give a copy of this to students at the beginning of a unit, and you read through it with them, get them to stick it in their books, and I always print them on coloured paper so that it's easy to find in their books that it's different to the general kind of bits and bobs they might have stuck in their books. You can talk through it with the students and you can make it very clear, look, this is your end point. At the moment, at the beginning of the course, there is no way you can achieve this end point. So before we've even studied of Mice and Men, you are not going to be able to write an analysis of the relationship between Curly and his wife. Now that is very useful in terms of behaviour management, because throughout the course you can say to the students, if you need to, look, you need to concentrate on this. You know you need this information for the endpoint. You're not going to be able to complete the assessment without this information. And you keep coming back to the reason you're doing it. And it really does help with the behaviour management. Likewise, it helps students take ownership of their own learning, because all of this stuff in this endpoint plan is normally in a teacher's head, but it's not in a student's head. So if you say to a student, what are you doing? They might say, we're watching the Of Mice and Men film. But if you say why, chances are they say, well, I don't really know. If you say, have you got an assessment coming up? Yeah, what's it about? Don't know. Whereas if this is in their books, they can keep referring back to it, make sure they know exactly what they're doing. So that's how it helps with student engagement and ownership of the learning, because they start to realize that you're empowering them. You're giving them all the information that they need to be able to, see the point of your lessons. It also helps you as a teacher if you plan a lesson. You think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then if you stop and think, well, how does that actually build towards the end point? And if it doesn't, don't do it. So it really does help you focus as a teacher. So let's look back at my points about why use endpoint planning. The first one then, helps teachers organise their marking load and time management. In terms of your marking load, if you do your endpoint plans before, let's say, we're in half term now, aren't we? So let's say you do your endpoint plans this week, and you work out that in the next half term, which is only 5 weeks long, you've got, a year 7 assessment, a year 8 assessment, a year 10 assessment, a year 11 assessment. You can map them out. You don't have to go right to the last week. So for example, this half term, my year 7s completed their controlled assessment in the penultimate week, so that I could mark that during the last week, so that when my year 11s completed their assessment during the last week, I would mark that during half term, so that I wouldn't have 100 pieces to mark. And this endpoint planning means that nothing just creeps up on you and all of a sudden you're overloaded and overpowered with loads and loads of work to mark, but it means that you can map out when you're going to do it and when you're going to mark it. How does it help you with your time management? Well, if you know that you're going to spread your marking out, and if you know that your endpoint is so set and you've got so many hours to get to it, it helps you to stick to that by not having pointless lessons. So in the Of